You're listening to the Karmic Mirror podcast, where we explore the wisdom tucked within the layers of the self-help world.
Together, we bridge the gap between esoteric teachings and practical tools for everyday life, with self-love and personal growth at the heart of each conversation.
Whether you're a seasoned seeker or just beginning your path, join us and uncover the magic within and around you. Hello, and welcome back to another episode of Karmic Mirror.
Hello, everyone.
Today, we are talking about VeeCon, which I am really excited about this episode because I am listening in real time with everyone else, with anyone listening right now, because I know very little about it, but here's what I do know. Maybe, I don't know, 2 months ago, Allie voice noted me with literally just like bursting with excitement and lit upness because she had a friend who, um, and you'll correct me if you know any of this, but who introduced her, or maybe just kind of put on your radar this incredible conference or convention happening in LA that was featuring all of these different speakers and cool experiences, panels, and it just so happened that a good chunk of them were people that we really admire and follow. And so Allie, voice noted me and was like freaking lit up about this convention. And
Beyond.
and I was just receiving her voice note and I was thinking, I don't know who this is. I don't know who Gary Vee is, but tell me more. And so today we're just going to talk about it because there were so many things that happened. And as Ali was updating me, through voice notes and such, because I couldn't go in person, and there was just so much that we needed to do an episode about it. And I'm sure that there are themes from the panels, from the speakers that maybe will show up in future episodes because there was just so much juice in that, in everything, from literally, I think I have WhatsApp notes, I have voice notes, I have all of it from you. And so let's get into it. Tell me, well, first of all, what is VeeCon?
You don't know VeeCon? What do you mean? Like you, I think at first I was like, I'm going to VeeCon, and I just assumed everybody knew what VeeCon was. That is not the case, but I was going around like, yeah, I'm in town for VeeCon. I'm here. But so VeeCon is a conference meets festival. It's founded by Gary Vaynerchuk, who is CEO and chairman of VaynerMedia, Vayner Sports. He's a creator of VeeFriends, the founder of VCR Group. Just impeccable human being, does a lot, inspires a lot. We could do 16 episodes on Gary Vee and the work he does, I am sure. How VeeCon came onto my radar is one of my very, very special and dear friends, Mei-Ling, is an executive vice president. And she's just one of the most talented human beings in the world. And I just want to give her a quick shout out because I'm just so appreciative, not only for her friendship, but for her making this connection and inviting us. So I think what happened was, VeeCon is her show. She's running it and has been since she worked for the organization. And again, VeeCon is that conference meets festival, and it just features conversations with the most accomplished, ambitious, and curious thought leaders in business, marketing, technology, innovation, and pop culture. There are entertainment activations. Really, the gist of it is to inspire connection, creativity, and growth. So you can just kind of think of that like buzzing area there. And there are just so many different speakers. And Mei-Ling had messaged me and said, do you know who this is? And it was a picture of Jenna Zoe, who is the founder of Human Design.
We're like, do you know who she is? Or is she also like Do you wake up to her app or and reference her work when for anything in life? What's going on? Let's check with our my human design app. Let's see what Jenna Zoe has to say about it.
Yeah. So I'm like, do I know Jenna Zoe? I'm like, that's how I learned about human design. And I have her app. And remember, I put you in their meeting. And oh my gosh, tell her, are you going to see her? Right. So pure generator lit up.
Mhm,
Just, are you going to
mhm.
see her? Tell her her work is so impactful. And Mealing's response was, hey, if you can swing it, you can have a media pass to come to this event. And I was so lit up. And that was kind of the text back to you. And so that was the start of the journey for me. And of course, I didn't even really know what VeeCon was. I just looked at the speakers. And when you start seeing not only like Gary Vee, because he's just in his own right, but Mona Vans, Ashley Graham, Nick Cannon, and then just a whole other slew of people in this wellness arena that Mark Groves. So I was just like really, really lit up about it.
Oh, yeah. Well, also, I think these some of these speakers, like Mark Groves, Jenna Zoe, they're people who have totally been a part of the conversation for you and I since literally the inception of our friendship. I think that it's funny. Mark Groves, of course, was on my radar a few years back because probably the To Be Magnetic podcast, I would imagine. But I remember when you and I met, and you were really into his work as well when he was doing Create the Love,
Hmm.
which was all about relationships, if I'm not mistaken. And so I just think it's really cool because you were like, Mark Groves is going to be there. And then I started looking at the list of speakers, and there was a lot of new names on there for me, a lot of people that you've introduced me to. And, but who else? There was someone else, I want to say, Peter Crone, I think, was a speaker,
Oh,
and,
he's so
there's
good.
so many people, and so I was like, "This is really super, super cool," but let me just backtrack because I think it's important to mention that, just talking about personal growth, vulnerable friendships, showing up authentically, it is so wild to think back when you voice noted me and you were so excited. I in like all honesty, didn't have the same reaction just for whatever reason, right? Like
Yeah.
we just are who we are.
You don't have to have a reason.
That's exactly right. Like I don't, and I immediately and it wasn't that I wasn't like super lit up. I was like, this is really fascinating. Like, look at all these people. Of course, who doesn't want to be in a room with Jenna Zoe or Mark Groves and hear these incredible, like you said, like thought leaders is really the best way to describe them.
Mhm.
And and to really hear them, see them in person, chat with them, it's to me, I think it's much more, um, I'm not a person who cares about celebrity so much because I think at a young age I worked in environments where I was around a lot of celebrities that it just,
Sure.
you forget. I lived in Las Vegas. So of course they're just, nightclub life on the
Mhm.
billboards and stuff. But
Yeah, and I feel that way also just being from New York and just having
totally.
exposure to things.
Yeah.
It's just a different lit up
It's a
around.
different lit up because these are people who they're not necessarily celebrities in the sense that in the traditional sense, they're people who inspire us in our personal growth paths in our lives. So it's like people who are showing the way of how to do the work in whatever their respective fields are. And so it's really different to get excited about being around these people because you're like, you've helped me heal. Your work has helped me grow and heal as a human being. And so it's such a deeper level.
Yeah, I mean, Mark Groves literally taught me about boundaries.
Yes. So it's
Literally
really,
taught me about
yeah.
boundaries. And this is 8, 9 years ago. I took his
Yeah,
course. I had seen him on social media. I really appreciate people with just like a frank, I'm going to say it like it is approach.
yeah,
A lot of people that I work with, you know, professionally for my own healing tend to fall in line with that. But you're so right. I mean, he taught me about boundaries. Jenna
yeah,
Zoe and human design taught me to love myself more and accept myself more and start living my life based on my gifts and my strategies.
yeah,
And that was the real excitement about that.
100%. So, like, there was that layer of like, oh my gosh, this is really cool. And then for me, like, my first reaction was like, oh. I don't think I can go. I'm not feeling this like sacral response to be, or this like gut body feeling of like, yes, I must be there. But you had already prefaced, you're like, whether you can go or not, I feel really lit up about this and I'm going to go. And I was like, okay, like my reaction, how am I feeling right now is I'm actually really freaking nervous that I'm gonna like dim your excitement by not being as lit up as you. And I think it's so just all the things. First of all, it's really important to talk about these things in friendship because so often we would just kind of sweep it under the rug. And it's different from saying, like, oh, well, I can go because you care about it. And that's one thing. That's, like that's friendship and doing
Well, were
things.
you feeling a little bit more pressure because it was Karmic Mirror related? Was
Yeah,
that
totally.
something?
And I was like,
Yeah.
well, yes. And also, Karmic Mirror related because obviously you had these media passes, and I was like, what a great experience, what a great opportunity. We just started a podcast a few months ago, and so we've already got this first invite to something really, really cool. And will I let her down? But honestly, I was just really nervous about not responding to you or about responding to you in a way that would in any way like make you feel less excited. And that's the truth of it. I was like, I don't want to like let her down as like a friend, and I don't want to let her down as a co-host. And so we were really honest about that, and it was cool.
And on the back end, I'm thinking, I don't want Michelle to feel pressured. I'm so excited, but like, I don't want her to feel, how can I not make her feel bad if she can't do it?
Totally.
Right. On the back end. So it's this beautiful friendship ebb and flow that we have that's really based, in my opinion, on assuming positive intent and trusting and knowing. And I was very, I think, transparent. Tell me about your point of view of like, hey, do I want you there? Yes. Do I think it would be so fun to have you there? Yes. Would it make me feel more confident, more lit up?
Yeah.
Probably yes. And if you're not meant to come, there may be a bigger reason why I'm meant to go alone.
Yeah.
So like it's fair to be like I want you there, but you're not disappointing me. I just want you there,
Yeah,
right?
1,000%. And also so much of it was, like you said, it's like just trusting that, you know, our responses, our actions are not so enmeshed or tied up with one another to dictate, and I don't want to use the word codependent, but truthfully, I have been in a lot of codependent friendships with women, and it's been a long time, obviously, but I do think being able to reflect on that, being able in the moment and just be really honest. And I felt like that was a really big deal for such a like subtle conversation. It
Yeah.
wasn't even a conversation. It was just like I said the thing and we got to just let it be what it was. And I thought that was so cool because so much happened as not even as a result, but just it opened the way for other things to happen in such a beautiful unfolding. Um and so like let's get into it
Okay.
because there's a lot. I mean, we've been obviously having like little tidbits of conversations about the experience, but there was just so much. I really, even before this conversation, we talked about just like this whole journey, the arc of you going to VeeCon, of
Yeah.
your response, your reaction, my response, how we handled it, to then how did you respond to like, okay, well, now that I know, I'm going to go alone. I'm going to represent Karmic Mirror, but mostly I'm going to be going to LA across the country by myself. Not that you're any stranger to traveling. I mean, you literally have done a
But I
crossroad.
certainly don't know what it means to have a media
That's
pass. I
exactly.
certainly like,
Yeah.
I've always, every time I've gone to conferences, it's been representing an
Yes.
organization or like really, it's like very intentional of why I'm there and I should be here and all of the places you should be. And here was this beautiful growth opportunity where I'm like, dude, I could literally lay in bed all day long if I wanted to and not show up for anything and no one is going to say anything. So it was really interesting from that point of view. And a little funny looking back because I think we did at some point have a conversation where you said, I didn't want to say it, but I think you were meant to go alone after all of the ahas when it was done. And I'm like, I know, I know.
Yeah.
And it's like a really cool journey when you can start to see all of the learnings and the
Mhm.
lessons
Mhm.
within just an invite to a conference with people that light you up. And it's why I'm so blessed to be, in friendship and in podcast partnership with you, because I get someone that we get to talk to about all of these things popping up. And so I think transparently, I've been like a little nervous about this episode because there are pieces of it that really hit on the nervous system
Oh, girl.
throughout this process.
Yeah, sorry to interrupt, but and like I don't want to jump too far ahead, but I just remember at one point, something had occurred, a few things I think,
Mhm.
and you had voice noted me, or maybe you called me or voice noted, at this point I can't even remember, but
Yeah.
you were like, I don't know if I'm gonna go. I mean, it was just you were just saying the thing, right?
No, I literally think it was a voice note, and I said, I don't think I can get on
Yeah.
this plane. I don't think I can go. And the intent is not to hide those details. I think the fear is that, so the background behind this and what I feel comfortable sharing now is that the background behind Karmic Mirrors, we were going to launch a year before we actually
Yeah.
launched. And what a recent friend has called that time in life for me, she goes, "Oh, that's after your big bang." So I had a big bang, and it's not one that I wanted to revolve our whole podcast
Mhm.
around. However, a lot of the nuances of what happened to me and my journey really do impact a lot of the conversations that we have here on Karmic Mirror. And being that 3-5 in human design, life's great experimenter, you literally are meant to share your life and your stories and your experiences with the collective, of course, in a way that you feel confident. So there's been this back and forth of, what do I share? What do I not share? Because there's a piece of it that doesn't want to be attached to that old narrative and
Yes.
that old story. But I think what I feel confident talking about today, because give like the very abridged version, because I feel like it's in integrity with our nervous system episode. And I think I'd be doing a disservice. We focused on this nervous system episode, and this was such a huge example of how the nervous system can show up when it's triggered. So, the 10,000-foot view that I'm comfortable sharing is that the Big Bang revolved around, I was in a 2-year relationship and was with the partner who made the decision to go on reality television. I stayed home with the request from him of, please stay home and take care of our girls at the time, as I was a bonus mom to his 2 children, his 2 little girls. And he left and came back, and I was now in a relationship with one more individual who he ultimately left me for. Now, why we share this is because, again, it's that fine line of, I don't want to get into the gossip and the drama of all of that, but how that impacts this story is that obviously you think about people being on reality television, and just when you're in trauma and you have PTSD, and even just things being on the internet or shows launching and people knowing about those things, and I've always been very private, has just been its own journey. The short version of this whole story is that the person that my partner left me for had filmed a new show and in the same franchise. And I found out the day before. I think the universe put it in front of me because I was not looking for it. I basically found out that this new partner, the network, and the show she was on was sponsoring the event, was sponsoring VeeCon. And there was also an activation going on around
Yeah.
that.
Can't make it up.
And yeah, you cannot make this up. And so a lot of things started happening. You go into that fear of like, oh my God. Honestly, at the time, I did not associate that the two were combined. I didn't even realize that.
Totally.
I was just like, what is going on? This is in LA. Okay, it can't be the same weekend. It was the same weekend. And you just feel your nervous system.
Yeah.
Okay, it's not. It can't. LA's huge. LA's
Mhm.
huge. Oh no, 8 minutes down from you. You're like, oh, so then my brain just, it's done for. She's going to be there. He's going to be there. Not only are they going to be at the event, but they're going to be staying next to me in the hotel room on my flight. And I laugh a little bit now because I think I mean, I literally was so panicked. I was like, Michelle, like, I can't get on this flight. I mean, my body was shutting down, and you were so gracious and loving and how you responded. But now I hear it in my head as like, girl, we just did 4 episodes on the nervous system. Pick any one of those and let's talk later.
Yes.
And that, of course, is not how you said it. But in that moment, my body was so hijacked.
Totally.
However, as a 3-5, and also going through this year and a half, it's like, okay, what do I need to do to regulate? And I discerned, I know what kind of friends I need
Yeah.
right now. And it just was everything, my ego all day long, as I'm packing. You don't like your clothes. You don't like these, you don't have anything to wear. You might as well not go. It's your inner opponent. And because of this last year, I mean, a lot of emotions came up, but one of them was definitely anger, because I just was so lit up and so excited about this event. And yet again, here was this blast from the past coming and just again, still negatively impacting my life. So there was a lot of anger around that too. And I really have to give a shout out to my friends Kate and Stacy. And I will say that the turning point where I was like, no, fuck this. Like, you're not letting people ruin this. And I'll be honest, like in the back of my head too, it's like, this is the inner opponent keeping you. It's trying to keep you from going and doing something, right? And that is going to be so life changing and beneficial for you. And shout out back to our sound healing episode, and you start to see how all things come together. Tess had said something about intuition, and when you have intuition, and how people like to gaslight you or make you believe that your intuition isn't a real thing. And my friend Stacy, without even listening to that episode, I had called her and she said, "Oh, right. So what if they are there?
Yeah.
Let's play that out. What if they are there?" And it got me to a place where the short story is I said, like, listen, if they're there, my biggest fear really is being alone. I don't care if there's confrontation because I feel in my integrity and I know my truth, but like being alone. And in my mind, it's like the whole cast is going to be there because I don't know, right? Like I didn't know all the details. And that was really the game changer where I just said, like, hey, can I call a friend card in? If they are there, will you literally get on a plane and come out and just be with me? And without hesitation, she was like, yes. And that made all the difference. And then the universe really supported me, because when I woke up for my flight at 4 a.m, I still was crazy anxious. But my friend had messaged me and just said, you don't have anything to worry about. I would have told you if you had anything to worry about. You have nothing to worry about. And that was enough. And so I got my ass on a plane and went to VeeCon.
Totally. Yeah. Well, also, and I hope it's okay to mention this, but talk about intuition. You had also had like a dream shortly before this where you had a confrontation and, you know, had this.
Yeah, I appreciate you being really careful, because I think, especially with children involved, and I want to make sure that I'm speaking in integrity
Yeah, yeah.
and what I feel comfortable with sharing as well. But I don't know when our cord cutting episode, if it'll come before or after this. But I was cord cutting before I even knew this,
Yeah,
around the ex and the new partner and all of those things. And what do they say in the cord cutting episode? Like, when you cut cords energetically, they'll show back up. And this wasn't necessarily like
totally.
her showing up, but it was her and him showing up in a lot of ways, right?
Yeah, yeah. Well, and let me just say this too, and the reason I brought up that is because, first of all, when I had heard this, this statement of like how often we can focus on the person, not the pattern. And not to say that this is the exact same scenario, right? Because there's a lot surrounding it. But what that made me think of was, a pattern is that I know to be true is that there have been several instances where you have had your intuition speak to you, whether it was through your dreams or through just your intuition, like your subconscious. There have been instances where you have just known something to be true or known something. And maybe it wasn't full clarity around the situation, but it was like you knew something. And talk about your intuition being gaslighted or being disregarded or not trusted, and then allowing that, and I'm really like, I'm not paraphrasing.
You're high leveling it. You can say it. I mean, what you're talking about when he left for the show, I had no reason to believe it. And I was
Yeah.
terrified, petrified that he was going to leave me for this individual. And was to no fault of anybody else, those who I felt comfortable talking to about it, it's like, no,
Yeah.
you live together, he asked you to
Right.
take care of his children. This is not something that would happen. And so I think just to give a little bit of that picture is like, so
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
you don't trust your intuition. And then for it to all come true, and then you can just
Right.
imagine, and again, we don't have to get so deep into the details, but you can imagine, I mean, the gaslighting and manipulation that went on when I was like, yo, I was so scared about you leaving me for this
Oh,
person.
yeah.
And just the gaslighting and manipulation that happened because he ultimately
Yeah.
left me for that person. Right. And so the other piece of it, Michelle, is that I don't want to live in that story my whole life. It is a part of my journey, and it's a big part of my journey in my life and all of the learnings. And while I'm not actively or proactively looking for anything online, I've not watched the shows, things have
Totally.
made their way back to me. And there is this piece of there are stories and narratives being told around the situation, and
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
they're just not my experience and feel very inaccurate, feel wildly like misrepresentative of how things happened. And, certainly, there's two ways to go about it, and or a couple of ways that you could approach those things going on. And the way I really discerned is this is my life too. And I'm allowed to talk about my life and my
Yeah.
perspective, and that's okay. However, for me, I always want to be in integrity, and this podcast is not about betrayal from exes, but
No, but it is about, and I mean, it's about a lot of things, but
yeah.
it is so much ties back to, literally self-trust and understanding that, like having your own back, having trusting your own intuition despite what people say, because I think that is so common. People will say like, "Oh, no way, that would never happen," right? But then we also get it on the flip side. Oh, I'm so, like people rushing to confirm or validate when, whatever it is, whether we can perceive it as positive or negative, rather than just letting there be, oh, that's, oh, you had an intuitive sense about this thing. Oh, you had a dream, and you have in numerous experiences where you've had something come through in your dreamscapes, in your
Mhm.
subconscious, that have really landed in in your reality. And instead of rushing to be like, no way, that would never happen, or to the opposite end of it, and we can think of so many instances, and if
Mhm.
and I would imagine that people can anyways can resonate with this, where either we rush to validate or we rush to like, change your what you feel, instead of just being super curious and being like, oh, well, tell me like what. And I get it, we don't have this, not everyone has the skill set or even the interest to be curious. But I think that it's something to note because it is such a powerful aspect of being in relationship with people, whether it's platonic, romantic, working relationships, whatever. But to be able to say, like, if you come to me with an intuitive insight of something, or I had this dream and it's totally rocked me, and now I don't even want to get on this plane, to be like, okay, well, let's like tell me more, or why, tell me about that, instead of rushing to
Yeah.
tell you the opposite of what you in your body are feeling, which is the ultimate truth, right? Like I don't have a say in what is true for you, and vice versa for anyone else. So, I think that part is really really, really important. And the other thing I think I said to you, which I always say, is I'm like, well, wait, you got to ride the wave of your emotions. I mean, I'm always like, sorry if this sounds like a broken record, or if I sound, my fear is oftentimes sounding insensitive because
Mm,
I'm always like, no, you just got to feel your feelings and you got to ride the wave. And it's not that I'm like, that's the one bit of advice that I would give to people, but knowing you and being your friend and your knowing that you have this emotional authority, that you are a three line, it's super important to me to reflect that back to you. Like, okay, ride the wave because, like, get all the data, get all that information from the highs, the lows to all of it so that you can actually, you know, make the right decision or do the right thing for
yeah.
you that isn't being influenced by these other people. Because at the end of the day, none of your experience was about anyone else but you. It wasn't about whether I went with you, it wasn't about this person and the ads just freaking plastered everywhere. And then
Mm.
back to the nervous system work,
I mean,
right?
literally, who gets to walk around a conference that there are pictures of the person your partner left you for, cheated on you with, was in your face? But here's what it also did. And I don't want to linger too long on this because we don't want to give too much energy to that here. While it is impactful and important to talk about that experience, and I guess maybe circling back to your point, Michelle, is you're so right. Is how can we show up for each other? Because one, my nervous system was rocked, right? And so for you to be like, F him, F her, F that, like you're going, would have not supported me
Right.
in that moment.
Because it gives you like a faux sense of like, okay, let's like pump you up with adrenaline or push my energy onto you. And
Yeah.
that's more external.
And the reality of it is that I have PTSD, complex trauma, adjustment disorder. Nobody needs to be like, and we're both life coaches. We wouldn't coach people on PTSD, right?
Right.
It's not in our wheelhouse. And so, especially with my friends, I try to have a lens. So by me going through this, I think it helps me be a better friend too. And
Right.
like feeling it and going through it. And the really, really fucking cool thing about this. Think about how my neural pathways have changed. It's
Mhm.
almost, what's the saying? Or there's where it's almost like the harder the thing, the deeper the wound, the harder the thing that you're coming across, like the greater healing, the greater movement forward. And to me, it just like I knew it in my head. I was like, this is just a really big test for you.
Yeah.
It's a really big test. Like this really beautiful manifestation of being put in front of expanders. I was getting to go see my dear friend who's pregnant on the West Coast. I mean, all these beautiful things that came out of this, I almost didn't get to experience because my nervous system was
Yeah.
rocked. That's just the reality of it.
Well, let's move on because there's a lot to talk about in here, but I do think that those themes just run throughout, right? Like, and what I
Mm,
mean by that is like trusting yourself, trusting your intuition, having your own inner validation, and like hearing the things that people say to you. And like you said, having your own lens of like, okay, I hear you and I see you, and you're showing up for me as a friend in the way that you know how. And also, I get to trust myself more than I trust what other people tell me to feel or how to show up. And I think that
mhm.
is so freaking amazing because, again, like we literally came off of recording 4 episodes on the nervous system. And we said it in every one. We're like, yes, doing the work is great. Having a breathwork practice, having mindfulness, all of this is wonderful. It's necessary. But the real work happens in the moment when you are activated or when an experience comes up or you're triggered, then you do the work, right? Like you do the nervous system work then in the moment, in those moments, and that's where you see the big impact of it. And that's exactly what was happening. And talking about riding the wave, it was like, okay, I don't think I can get on this plane. All right, we'll feel it. Feel that. Like just let yourself be in the depth of your suffering and your sorrow or whatever. Don't let me put emotions on you, but like just feel it, because the faster you can feel it, the more you can move on or move through it to whatever else is there. It's just like in coaching, you're like, okay, and what else is there? What else? Because there's more than what we can just see right in front of us or what our body can feel. And so, anyways, so we're there.
And yay me, because remember we were talking about nervous system and we had learned that freeze and fawn, you have to get through those to get to fight or flight. We were talking about something like that. So
Okay.
the fact that I was literally in flight,
Yeah.
not on the plane, but I was wanting to run away from that,
Yeah.
as hard as those emotions can feel, it in hindsight, okay, you're not freezing anymore. You're not numbing anymore. And that felt like a huge win and growth and healing as well.
Totally, totally. And I feel like, we're talking about VCon, and yes, we will get to some of the things that happen there because I'm curious as well. But also, it's just fascinating because there are so many, like, this was just the start of like, okay, well, what else is going to come up for you as a result? So it was like, yes, VCon, great, wonderful, cool speakers, amazing, all of this. And also, there were so many other deeper layers that were going on because you talked a lot about, of course, the like that fear of like that what could happen as a result of being alone in this space and maybe coming up, being confronted by really uncomfortable situations. And then it was like, okay, well, then I'm going to travel across the country and get a hotel and do all of these things. And yeah, so
Yeah, I think the themes, that came up, fear, scarcity, there was a lot of that going on of, can I even afford to do this, right?
mhm,
Can I even logistically make it happen? Being alone, something else that I've been really focused on this last year is being seen and being accepted in my full authenticity. And here I was headed to this place where, will I have anyone to hang out with?
yeah.
Will you, right? I don't know what any of this, will I get to talk to some of these people? How will I prepare for that? Imposter syndrome.
Hmm.
What will I even say to these people if I get to talk to them? Because it's little old me. And how will I represent Karmic Mirror to make Michelle proud and be accurate in that? But the reframe also is that knowing myself so well, I know community is my strongest gift.
Yeah.
So let me go sprint towards community of like-minded souls. And that was a little bit of the faith in there. And then I also really got to practice surrendering. There were so many cool people I met just by surrendering. So are you cool? Let me start diving into the cool stuff about VCon and the
Yeah.
guests. Full circle back, why it was so cool too is that Mark Groves was on his podcast. He had the angry therapist, John Kim, on his podcast during COVID.
Okay.
And John Kim on that podcast talked about Journey at the time, now Lumia, which is the organization that Michelle and I got our life coach certifications
Yeah,
through.
and John Kim is the co-founder of that with Noelle Cordeau, who is the bomb.
Amazingly brilliant.
Intelligent,
Yeah, not enough
superwoman.
words to highlight her. And part of the reason, and you please speak to this as well, Michelle, that we started Karmic Mirror was based off of the commonalities Michelle and I had in human design. One of the things that really connected Michelle and I early on, she had sent me To Be Magnetic, the system for manifesting, and she was talking to Jenna Zoe, who founded My Human Design. And we just dove in so deep and started learning. And we used to early on talk about they're so cool. Look at their community. They just get to be surrounded by all of these people. And they just exchange services, but that's okay because they're also highlighting and sharing and generating abundance
Mhm.
from that. And for me, that was really something that formed the pillars of Karmic Mirror as well. And so it's not lost on me, this full circle of meeting Mark Groves and meeting Jenna Zoe, and I would say Taylor Brewy, who is in charge of her strategy and is her podcast co-host. That was really, really cool.
Yeah, I think that's super cool. I actually didn't realize that that the whole connection with Journey slash now renamed as Lumia, our coaching school, which also is really I highly recommend it if you're interested in coaching or just learning how to
Yeah,
be
it's super
a
good.
more expanded, evolved human being. You don't even have to get into coaching, but it's a great program. So I love that. And yeah, I think that's really cool. Well, let's talk about, I mean, you went to a lot of panels. And so you brought up Mona Vand, who was someone that I also had not heard of. And it's super fascinating to me to always think back to how small our bubbles can be, because these are, really established people, a lot of them. And it's funny, we live in a bubble in so many ways. Whether it's the algorithm consistently showing us more of what we already know and see, and you have to almost, in this like wildly digitally connected world, if you really want to expand your worldview, you actually have to go out and look, because the more you rely on what, is just put in front of you, the smaller and smaller your world can get.
I was actually surprised that Mona Vand hasn't been on your radar. And I think even when I was like, Mona Vand's gonna be there, I met Mona
And I was like,
Vand.
okay.
Wellness expert, entrepreneur, and again, just these really cool kismet things of I was
Mhm.
listening to her latest podcast at the time, and she just changed her podcast format. She was doing weekly, and she was just transparent of, for a lot of reasons, I'm going to move to once a month, and a lot of reasons. And at the time, we're bi-weekly at this point, and I'd been feeling a lot of pressure of how do we get up to weekly without losing the organicness and flow of the beautiful things that I think we've been able to create in flow, you and I, Michelle. And I had met this really beautiful Canadian couple who ended up being my homies throughout the time there. And we were talking, and he said, "Oh, I met Mona Van this morning." I said, "You did? I would love to meet her." He's like, "Just go up to her." Now, we talked about this before. I don't want to be that person. And that was a little bit of stepping out of my comfort zone too here, where VeeCon was so brilliant and different than a lot of other conferences I've been to, because you had more accessibility to these people. They are very accessible, which is really cool and all very inviting. And I just simply said this to him. I was like, no, if I'm meant to meet her, I'll meet her. And I left it at that. And not even an hour later, I go up to my room to just do a quick refresh. And I go to the elevator, and ding, it opens. And who is in there? Mona Vand.
Yeah.
I'm like literally on an elevator, three people with Mona Vand. And I was just like, oh my gosh. And so she was so delightful. I really recommend everybody checking her out, because not only is she just beautiful and I love her style and her aesthetic, but she is so brilliant and so intelligent in the area of being a wellness expert and entrepreneur. So that was really nice. And I was like, we got to bond a little bit. I was like, I loved your latest podcast. And I was like, I can't listen to your podcast every week, but I can once a month. And she's like, right? And I was like, yeah. So just really cool. That was a fun run in. And she was also on a wellness panel that I attended later on. It was how food can help heal,
Yeah.
which was really interesting.
Well, I think the overall and underlying theme is, of this conversation is literally, like you said before we started, recording, was full circle moments, because the number of ways that we see this like connecting thread between your experiences. So it's funny because it's less about the environment and the people. It is, but it isn't, right? It's like more about all of these cool ways that you were, again, like, if I surrender to the things I cannot control, if I surrender to this overwhelming feeling of like, I can't do this thing, or I'm going to be alone, right? Like all the things we tell ourselves, all the narratives or stories that we're playing out in your mind. And, back to the nervous system, our brain doesn't want us to be happy. Our brain wants us to be safe. And so in those moments, all those ways that like, maybe little you or adult you knows to keep yourself safe. And by safe, oftentimes that looks like small, not seen, not showing up in your truth and your authenticity. And, what would it look like if I surrender to this, and what's on the other side? Connecting with people who are super expansive, literally watching in real time how you're able to manifest and call things in. I think that's really important, because we forget to sometimes just make note of those things like, oh, if it happens, it happens. Boom. Let me walk up the elevator or whatever it is. And here she is, this person who I am just so in awe of her work.
There were so many synchronicities like that. It's no surprise if you've listened to our other podcasts. I talk about Iyanla Van Zant a lot. Inner Visions is her organization. My both of my life coaches work and are affiliated with that organization as well. And she had Nick Cannon on, and that was another one. Without going too deep into all of that, I thought how he showed up on that call talking about council culture was just really cool and gave men a voice. And I think it's really important for men to have role models, and especially men who say, I got canceled. I didn't do this right, but I'm learning and I'm growing. And I think that's really important in today's society. And there was an opportunity. He spoke on the main stage. So they had a lot of panels, and then they also had people on a main stage, which is where everyone would be at. And I was up front, and so I could have easily ran up and got a selfie with him. But I just was like, you know what? I'm going to surrender. And if I'm meant to meet him, I will. And the short story is I'm outside talking to my dear friend Mei Ling. Not only did I get a chance to talk to her because she's so busy, but here comes Nick Cannon, and four of the people with him come walking up to Mei Ling. And I'm like, hi, Nick Cannon. And I got to meet Nick Cannon and share with him really briefly. And something very similar happened with Jenna Zoe and Taylor Gruey as
Yeah.
well.
Well, and on that note of men and having real honest conversations that have to do with, this concept of council culture and accountability and, and just having those conversations. I think the other person was, back to Mark Groves, right? Like, this is a person who is very expansive for you. At least I know to be very expansive for you in the way that he shows up as a man in this
Yeah.
world.
Lewis Howes as
Oh,
well was
yes, Lewis
there. I
House,
mean,
totally.
brilliant. Total. I mean, I'm trying to find a lot of conscious men expanders,
Pittsburgh,
and
yep.
so it wasn't lost on me that you had Lewis Howes there, you had Nick Cannon, Mike Posner, and again, think what you want of these people, but they are all conscious, growing, learning men who I think deeply appreciate human beings, and that's what
Yeah,
I'm
yeah,
calling
real
in.
authentic people who can, show up imperfectly um, and grow and evolve, right? Because I think just to not to spend too much time on this, but so often we either place people in boxes, and especially I think a lot of men, and I'll just say like straight men in particular, right? Of, whatever expectations we have of them societally of men. And the second that validate that expectation or prove people quote right, you're like, okay, you write them off. And we don't allow the room, right? Like, there's either on the far end of the spectrum. I mean, I think you know how I feel about just cancel culture in general. I think doesn't leave a lot of room for human error and just to be, and we've had our conversations about this, but
Mhm.
it's an imperfect concept because we don't allow for growth and accountability and people to feel we only it's like we expect people to live in whatever stories of shame, like who gets to decide who gets to grow and heal. um
Yeah.
and so I think when you say conscious men, I think that's so incredible about just allowing yourself to be open to see more examples of men just being real and authentic in the same way that we allow women generally, and I'm making a huge generalization, but that we tend to allow women to be like on our healing journeys and growing and
Don't often create space as much for men
Mhm.
in that, which is why it was so impactful that Iyanla had created that environment of women, we're going to take care of our brothers now and our men now and let them have the space
Yeah.
in that one
Totally.
instance, in that
Even just
learning.
these panels, right? As I'm looking at them, it's like how food can help you heal. And how many times, you've been like bringing up situations or certain, experiences and talking about like literally for, I don't know how long now. You're like, okay, I think the next thing is I'm going to get more in tune with my nutrition and I'm going to focus, like you've said this
Mhm.
a few times in the last few months. And so, just going back to that and you saw on that panel, right? It was Mona Van, it was Roddy Devlukia, and I hope I'm saying that right. I may or may not be, but I love her. And we sometimes,
Jay
yeah,
Shetty
Jay
is her
Shetty is her
husband.
husband.
We like to say that,
Yes.
Rodney's husband.
Because also another example of a conscious man, but also Roddy is just, I find the way that she shows up on her podcast, on her Instagram, just in general in life to be so beautifully inspirational and authentic to who she is. I was just listening to her on a podcast talk about how she was on, like, I think it was Good Morning America or something, and she showed up and she didn't have any makeup on because she doesn't wear makeup. And they were like, "Wow, you're so brave to do that," and in her mind she's like, "Well, this is just how I am every day." And she's like, "And I've done
Yeah.
this for so long that I've grown comfortable in my skin." And so she's come up a lot too.
Before we start getting into the wellness circle, I do want to just highlight some more of people who were given a larger stage to speak. And the one cool connection, Will Guidara, am I saying that correctly? Do you know Gildara, who did Unreasonable Hospitality, the one who you had a
Oh
connection
yeah,
with
I
in
think that's
Millbrook?
so great. You mentioned that you I don't know how it came up. You were like, "We had this."
I was talking about it because I was lit up about it, and you were
Yeah,
like,
and you
wait,
didn't
who?
even say his name, and I was like, "This sounds like someone that I kind of know, but not we're not like pals. We don't, hang out or anything like that." But yeah, Will
Mhm.
Guidara, he is a major restaurateur, and also I've met him because he was, looking to buy a big property where I live, and just a great again, another example. This is a person who I have no idea what his personal wellness journey looks like, but he seems very much the another shade of what it looks like to be a conscious man. And I mean that in the sense that, I met this person who is incredibly well established in the restaurant industry and well known. And his wife is, Christina Tosi, who, if you haven't had Milk Bar, not
Run,
to say that you might
sprint.
be like living under a rock, but, and then you meet this person who's, like, just super down to earth and so kind, and it just reminds you that of all the different ways that you can be successful and still be grounded and just very, very authentic, and I've only seen that from him in the few interactions. And I really love that. I think that's really important. But you were talking about his panel and just talking about hospitality and what it means to like build relationships with people or just be thoughtful. And maybe I'm paraphrasing because I didn't listen
His
to it, but
topic was hospitality, how giving people more than they expect can get you to number one. So keep in mind, I mean, obviously, our conversations lend themselves towards wellness because that's our space and we love that and that's what we geek out on. But, keep in mind that this was an overall space where it's building community across the world to exchange knowledge, nurture creativity, and build lasting connections. So there was a lot of different topics and content there.
yeah, it feels very Aquarian age as well, because the more that we start to, the more that I think I won't say the world because it's not the case, but I do think that you see a lot more people awaken to the understanding that, you know, yes, life is ultimately, there's always an exchange of whether it be energy or material things, but, and there is always exchange and interactions, but so much is community based. And I think that more people are moving more towards that understanding that we are not separate, that everything is connected in so many ways. So you have all these different industries speaking, but at the end of the day, you're like, well, I can think about in my professional career before becoming a coach, yeah, we sold ridiculously expensive beauty products. But how did we do that successfully? It was by connecting with people and building relationships. And, the people who sold to your flaws or sold to your your fears, your insecurities, that's not sustainable. But connecting with people and knowing them and seeing them, that's how you build relationships. And that translates to any type of work that you can do,
Mhm.
really.
Yeah. And the last couple that I want to just really shout out because they lit me up so much. Ashley Graham.
Oh, yeah, you love
I
her.
mean, not only just babe of all babes, first of all, I can't, she's even prettier in person. But two, so empowering, so inspiring, so authentic, so transparent. And she talked about empowering entrepreneurs. And I also got introduced to a show that her and Emma Greed have together called Side Hustles or Side Hustle on Roku. And it's free. I would recommend and everyone to watch it. So basically, what they do is they're taking women who are trying to build brands, businesses as a side hustle, and they select some, mentor them, help them to start changing their business and growing it. So ultimately, they can leave their full time jobs to focus on this
Yeah.
side hustle. And ultimately, at the end, these women pitch to Ashley and Emma, and they will make the decision if they're going to invest in their company or their brand. But one, I just think and I'm getting chills so much. I'm so pleased that I was introduced to Emma Greed
Mhm.
because she is just a complete expander and badass in the entrepreneurial space as a woman, especially. And how cool that they're working with women to get women to be able to have access to information that, let's be honest, like women haven't, it's just a fact. Women entrepreneurs don't have a lot of female mentor women available to them because the balance of men to women in entrepreneurial is just it's mixed
Yeah.
balance, right? So
I also think there's a lot of people kind of that for a long time really gatekeep these resources. And what happens when, and again, another sweeping generalization,
yep.
but what happens when women are in positions, it's of power, and what happens more times than not, right? Or I'll say women, but I also think it's a lot of marginalized communities that when they become successful, really return that back to their communities in some way, shape, or form. And you see it time and again.
Mhm.
And so I think that's really important
I
to,
just shared that video with you of Jenna Greed being interviewed about networking and saying how men and women network different. And
yeah. Well, that men are incredibly good at networking and women are looking to build relationships and connect. And again, another generalization, but we can see that play out more times than not. And I think it's very true. I'm reminded of this TED talk from Carla Harris, who's a big, I don't know what her position is now, but she is big in the finance world. She worked for JP Morgan, probably still does. Maybe she's a VP or higher. I don't know. She's just another just really, really badass woman doing the thing, but she has a really popular TED talk that talks about, getting it's more important to have people who advocate for you, who will be in the room that big decisions are being made and will be an advocate for you. And that comes back to that conversation with Emma Grede of just women building relationships and looking at networking as a very in a different way
mhm.
of not just this exchange, again, like going back to that, not just this like you do for me, I do for you, but truly like, I'm thriving, I'm doing well. How can I bring up everyone around me or the people? How do I not gatekeep these secrets or the methods that got me to where I am, but how do I help other people because I understand? And again, back to
Mhm.
self-trust and knowing yourself, trusting that there's enough to go around,
I just like
that you don't have to hold on tight to everything, that you can trust there's so much out there that there's enough for everyone to be built up
yeah.
with you. And not only that, it's just part of your work to continue to pass along that wisdom and share it. And so I love it. And I'm going to get into that show, Side Hustle,
So good.
because
I learned so much. My childhood friends are putting out a hot sauce brand and a sauce brand, and I immediately was like,
oh yeah.
"You have to watch Side Hustle." There's a woman on there who has started a chateau, which is authentic to a specific country in Africa. All women are known for the chateau, and so she is launching this sauce. And so I was like, watch the
Oh, that's
show because you'll get to see Jenna and Ashley both mentor her. So you'll get to see both of them talk about sauce brands and things to think about, which was pretty neat. Mike
mhm.
Posner, I will just his time on stage was so impactful, seemed very different than a lot of keynote speakers that I've seen. So I just want to make sure I shout him out because his growth and his journey has been really cool to get to hear about through his talk on stage. And so anyone out there listening to book people for maybe corporate America keynote speakers, I would highly recommend his speech was just really impeccable how it tied everything together. So that's what I'll say about that. And then would love to get into the wellness circle. So they had a wellness circle where there was 4 different panels. One was how athletes achieve peak mental performance. One was how food can help you heal. One was how to be mindful in a fast-paced world, and then how to prioritize your mental health was there. And you already kind of talked about this a little bit, but circling back, another person I'd love to highlight is Megan Swidler, who I was not familiar with, but she's a holistic health and detox coach, creator, advisor, and investor. And as a result, I picked up her book and I'm starting to read about just the impact of what we put in our body. And one of her big things that I'm reading in the book is we, as human beings, focus a lot on what goes into our body. But really, we need to be thinking about what's coming out and how we're able to take in what's coming into our body as well, because there's parts of how your body functions that you could put all of the right amount of nutrients in your body. But if your body is unable to absorb it because you haven't detoxed or there's too much gunk in there, then it doesn't really matter what you put in your body. So the big thing from that, and I know this isn't new news, but following her book, I've now started every morning I'm doing hot water and lemon, and that to detox your digestive system. And I'm telling you, I mean, I think I messaged you, Michelle. I'm like day 2 or 3, I'm not someone who has a lot of digestive issues by nature. My goal was more just to clean out my system, but I know I have messaged you. I'm like, it's 2 days and I'm already seeing a difference just by starting my day with hot lemon water.
Yeah,
Who
yeah.
else?
Well, what other takeaways, what are the ahas aside from all of the ones that we've talked about, which there's so much. And I really I just think one, our conversation, if anyone even, takes anything away from this conversation, it's just being aware, being open to let what's meant to unfold and show you how many things can be connected within our lives. The power of just being able to surrender to what we can't control. And I think surrender and self trust go hand in hand because if you can cultivate what you've been doing, the work, right? Like to just build back up. And again, once we start doing this inner work of healing, whatever it is, if it's building self trust and, there's this domino effect, but it's like you get to that point of the work and the healing where everything starts to, you just are open and aware of so many things. You're like, oh, I see how that, like, there's another example of how I'm maybe, I think you use you talk about being tested, or this test in front of me, and TBM uses that language too. And I think, whether we view it as a test or just an opportunity to be more aware of the ways in which you're evolving, in which you're already doing so much healing. And it can get really, it just can get either really
Mhm.
overwhelming to feel like, oh my God, everything is a test, everything is this, and then you get to a point where you're like, okay, and I can surrender to that. I know that already. And so, how else am I going to show up differently? And then the second that you make that decision, that conscious decision, and you start to just take the steps, like get on the plane and go to the thing,
Surrender.
do
What
walk
if?
through, yeah, feel the fear and do it anyways. The more you do it, the more you are reflected back your experiences, right? It's like our brains, like whatever the story we tell ourselves, our brain is going to go in search of validation for that. So if you tell yourself, I can't do this, I'm afraid, I'm going to have this, then your brain is going to look for the evidence to tell you that you're right. But if you tell yourself, I can surrender to this because I trust that I'm going to hold myself no matter what. Like I have the people in my lives. My highest gift is community in my chart, and I get to show myself and see example after example of community, people who have shown up for me and continue to show up for me in the ways that I need. And then you're like, oh, okay, like now my brain and the universe are conspiring to make sure that those things are continually reflected back to me and put in front of me to show me the evidence that, yes, I can surrender, I can trust in this. And what I don't know is all of the wonderful, beautiful things that are on the other side of that
Yeah.
surrender. My manifestations coming through to me on small and grand scales. My inner resolve just getting stronger and stronger with each step. It's really beautiful. So,
Yeah.
anyways, I asked you a question and then I went on a tangent. So, what other takeaways?
Don't
What
ever
else?
apologize because we are both on this podcast together. I think the last thing before we get going, just I really want to talk about how to prioritize your mental health because those speakers, there was a lot that came out of there. And I think one, just on a personal standpoint, when you're talking about like getting out of your own way, let me tell you that this last panel, so the whole reason I was at VeeCon, Jenna Zoe was going to be there. That was like the driving factor. So I had heard that those rooms got crazy packed. People were getting turned away. So I was like, I am going, getting front row. It wasn't that big of a room, but I'm going to stay for all 4 sessions. That way I get to sit in front. When Jenna Zoe and she was with Mark Grove. So I was like, I'm going to sit in front. Now, before it had started, I had recognized Taylor Gruey, who is the head of strategy for My Human Design and such an expander for me as well. And there are those things where I'm like, just go over and say hello. And I mean, if you want to know what sunshine is, go follow Taylor Gruey on Instagram. Just the warmest human being. I mean, I think I went up and I was like, hi, Taylor. I was like, I'm Allie. And she just like gave me a big hug. I was like, I messaged you on Instagram. She's like, you did? And she just opened Instagram. She's like, let me follow. And the short story is that we talked for a little bit and she kind of tells me a little bit about the grief journey she's been on. And I recommend please go listen to the My Human Design podcast because that is a brilliant, awesome podcast as well, where they share more about Taylor's journey as well. But there was this moment on the panel before, because I also want to highlight Ali Michelle, who is a beautiful poet. And she was asked to give one of her lines of a poem. And she said, I no longer avoid the point of breaking. I say to the world, break my heart, break it so wide open that all of life can fit between the pieces. And Taylor and I had just kind of been talking. I kind of leaned back like, girl, you good? Because, like grief was such a theme and like it hit my heart. So hers was very fresh. And I was like, girl. And then before the next panel, right before the panel started, someone came in and said, hey, these seats are for the family. In that moment, this is the cool learning where I was like, you could have been so disappointed. I've been here all day just for this panel and I'm in front and now you're asking me to move. And instead, I just was such in surrender that like everything for my highest good. And it's like, go sit next to Taylor, not to like go bother her, but I like walked over and that's how I got to talk a little bit more to Megan Swidler, and Taylor and I connected a little bit more. And let me tell you, like such expanding, because when you talk about calling in community and talk about how I've really been working on wanting to show up authentically myself in places. I mean, I literally am having this conversation with Taylor saying like, oh my gosh. And when you first jumped on Jenna's podcast, I was like, who is this girl? Like, who is she? And then I slowly was like, oh, you're jealous of her. Why are you jealous of her? Because she's standing in her worth. She's got a sick relationship with her boss. Like they ebb and flow. And she really became an expander to me. And then we talked for a little bit and I wanted to, give her space. And I was like, maybe I can go meet Jenna Zoe. And all of the speakers were gone at that point. And, you feel a little bit of disappointment, but I was like, you know what, that conversation with Taylor was so fulfilling. We connected a lot on just grief and it really was so serving. I'm like, that was the point. You were meant to meet Taylor. You weren't meant to meet Jenna, right? And then literally at one point, I'm in like the media room and I see them walk by and they're like, there's Jenna, go get her. And I'm like, I am not. Like, they're going to a flight. I'm not going to go run after them. And then later I was walking
Yeah.
into the hotel and there was Jenna and Taylor right in front of me. And so I would say the same
Mhm.
thing, like Jenna as well, just so warm, so opening. They felt like best friends. You're able to just be like, I've learned so much from you guys. And like, it just was really rewarding for me because I think people who work in that space, I hope that they really can hear like the impact that they've made. And literally, I mean, we're sitting here today recording a lot because of the work that Jenna does, because you introduced her to me and we started talking about it. And our fifth lines really highlighted that we wanted to start. I mean, hello, Karmic Mirror is after fifth line in human design. So that was
Yeah.
a really cool kismet thing. And then I also want to talk about Serinda Swan. And I'd love for you to also highlight because you're like, who is that woman? Because she's an
Mhm.
actor and a co-founder and CEO of Blueprint, which is an app that teaches kids emotional intelligence. And then you had messaged me
Yeah.
because
Oh, well, last night, because I was like, who is this woman again? You talked about this. Well, first of all, emotional intelligence continues to come up in conversation. And really specifically when we're talking about young people, kids, and, preteens, teenage age, but just young adults in general, because so many reasons. My husband works at a school, he works in a boarding school, and, when they're teenagers, and I think just this generation of young people and further, right? Like the world has changed so rapidly. Their lives are led so wildly different than even what we grew up on, right? Like they say millennials are we're just this age group where or this generation where, we saw the beginnings of technology and social media in the way that we live it now, but we lived life prior to that. I mean, I had a pager,
no, not
okay?
the pagers.
Pagers were
What
great and
color was yours? Mine was
everything.
clear. Well, I had a couple, but the clear one I felt so cool
I had a
about. My best
couple,
friends.
like the green, and I would get in trouble all the time because I would take it off in middle school and like leave it on the bathroom sink and then lose it. So, anyways, I think that, and we won't get onto this onto my soapbox about this, but just the way that whether it's education, life skills, um, I don't know that we have as a culture necessarily evolved. Well, I know that we haven't moved as quickly as things have changed for young people. Their lives are our lives, but especially young people, their lives are online in so many ways. Their lives are driven by technology because that's how they learn, but yet we still teach them and we still respond and we still guide them in so many of the same ways, and the world is different. And so, how do we, and just using one example, right? Like, I can think of numerous instances where there might be a person who is like really lively on social media. They are so outgoing and bold and confident. And then in person, it's a wildly opposite experience, right? Those interpersonal skills, the emotional intelligence. It's just we have to meet people where they're at regardless. And so I'm really passionate about young people when it comes to teaching them those skills, those soft skills that, we didn't necessarily get that either, but we also are so fortunate to be in this wellness space that we get to explore those concepts and understand it a little bit more. And going back to even Will Gadar talking about what it takes to build a successful restaurant, to be the number one restaurant in the world. He's talking about
Yeah.
soft skills. He's talking about emotional intelligence and understanding people, seeing people, hearing people, and and having that in return. And so I had text you last night because I was at dinner, and this woman who, she bartends and she's a yoga instructor, but also since I've met her, at the bar, just as a bartender at the local restaurant we go to, She had started, over the last couple years, she was getting certified. She's a school counselor now, and she works at the same school that my husband works at. And so every once in a while, we have these conversations. And she's also a really just conscious human being and really a beautiful soul. And so I text you because I was like, she's got to know about this app, and I need to know about the app. And you and I talk about emotional intelligence and how can we craft experiences to help not just young people, but like
Yeah.
help adults who are just people are yearning to know like how to connect with one another, how to feel less isolated. And it's not as easy as just making the decision to be like, I'm just going to go. I'm going
No.
to know how to do this. No, that doesn't happen. It's a skill set. And not everyone is born with that skill set. It is learned. It can be learned in the same way that the opposite is learned, And
Surrender
so,
Swan. And I think,
Serinda
again, the one that I
Swan
really wanted
is
to highlight, I was thinking back, I mean, we could probably do an episode on every single one of the topics that each of the speakers at the conference, highlighted as their area of subject
mhm,
matter expertness, right? But why I was really lit up, and obviously because we were kind of waiting for this episode to talk about it, but obviously I was chomping at the bit because I told you all about it. I've been telling all of these people because I would really highlight, go check out her work. The purpose behind it and her story attached to it is why I know this will be successful, because her purpose behind it is so great. But what I learned from her is, well, we know these things, but we don't think through them to this level. And she has with Blueprint is that EQ is the highest predictor of success. Fortune 500 companies, 90% of leadership teams pick
100%.
people with a high EQ, but yet we don't teach children about that. 80%
Mhm,
of jobs that they're going to need to fill in
yeah,
2030, most of them don't even exist now. So what are we teaching children? And we can get on a
yeah.
high horse here, but that's why that work really resonated. And then just before we get off, one more person I want to highlight is Elliot Connie, who is a psychotherapist and author and founder of the SFU, which is based around solution focused brief therapy. And I'm definitely going to dig deeper into it. And maybe you and I research a little bit and we have an episode on it. But he really spoke to me, his work, just the way he presents and how he explains and talks about SFBT. And the big takeaway that's really been resonating in my head since we left, because the topic was how to prioritize mental health. And he said, if you want to improve mental health, you have to fall deeply in love with you. And when you do, two natural consequences are going to happen. You're going to accept the reality that there's no such thing as a perfect person, literally, no perfect people in this world. And so
Mhm.
then, if that's true, then the opposite must be true. And there are no imperfectly perfect people. So that means we have to accept ourselves and our quote unquote flaws. And that will help us take better care of ourselves. And that helps mental health. And so he was the last one that I really wanted to make sure on this episode that I was highlighting, and we can tag. And certainly there's areas of opportunities to highlight other things within the conference and speakers. But those were the big ones that I really felt called to make sure that I highlighted during our conversation today.
I love that. Yeah, definitely want to check this person out. Positive psychology is what really underscores like life coaching competencies. It's not about dwelling on, what's not working, what you don't want. It's about, again, the solutions and how do I focus on what I'm really good at? How do I focus on my strengths and leverage those? And also, the more you can do that, the more you can kind of relinquish this idea that you need to be good at everything or that you need to have everything figured out or whatever that is, and such a core element
Yeah.
of just coaching and life in general. If you're ready to move forward, there's only so much, you've got to focus on like what is working now? What do I want more
Mhm.
of? It's like moving towards the thing.
I want to just
I
highlight
love
one
it.
more
I love
thing.
all of
I think the
this.
last thing, just on a personal note, that I
Yeah,
wanted
go
to
ahead.
highlight is that I was really enthused again of community, and I made friends with Brooklyn and her mom, Nancy, and Brooklyn's a creator, and I got exposure to just a different generation of women. And that was really cool to see how people in their early 20s, women specifically, are navigating being creators and how they're living lives. And listen, just what a beautiful soul she was, what a beautiful soul her mother was. And I really learned a lot by opening myself up to saying yes to things. She had invited me to a creators event, and my initial response was like, I cannot go to a creator event. I'm 42 years old. I am not cool enough. And she's like, just come, let's go. And I had a blast, and I got to hang out with my friend. I got to meet Flavor Flav, which was really fun. And just really, that was a really beautiful connection too. I kept saying I felt like I had a little sister and a big sister. And so just bringing it all home, I feel super crazy blessed to have been given this opportunity, because not only were there so many people I was introduced to, from panelists to speakers and different bodies of work, that, to your point, I can't even dig deeper into all of that, but also just on a personal level, so much growth, so much expansion. So if we get the invite back, you're coming with me next year, yeah? We'll see how you're.
Well, true to my sacral form, I'm like, I could say yes now, but I may feel differently in the moment. And but totally, yeah. I mean, I just, again, like you said, everything comes full circle. The more you showed yourself that you're safe to surrender, the more all of those connecting synchronicities reveal themselves to you. And again, like I said, you tell yourself a story and your brain will go find the evidence to prove you right. And you told yourself a story, right? Like, you are safe to surrender into this experience. And then all of these different literal experiences, connections, all of it, further proved to you that you were safe to surrender, that you were, because there was so much beauty on the other side of that. There was so much waiting to come through the moment that you just made the decision to, like, hold yourself through it.
Yeah. I mean,
And
I
that's
literally thought
really
I was
fucking
going to get
awesome.
sick because I was also working while I was there, my freelance job. And I think I told you this, and I was on West Coast time. I mean, I was not getting very much sleep, and I was very nervous about getting sick. But I think just my generator
Uh,
energy, I was so lit up the entire time that I just had energy for days. And I think that that is like really telling. And so just thank you, Michelle, and thank you,
yeah.
Karmic Mirror audience, for giving me the space to really highlight just a snippet. And special shout out to my boo Ling Chow, and giving us that connect. And again, just look for those that we're going to tag that we've spoken about, because if you really enjoy and are connecting with the content that Michelle and I have been highlighting on Karmic Mirror, I think you could get down with some of these people that were at the conference as well. So I'd really encourage you to
All
explore.
right, everyone. Thank you so much for listening, and we'll see you next time.
Thanks for tuning in. If you resonate with today's conversation, connect with us on Instagram at Karmic Mirror Podcast and send us a message.
And don't forget to subscribe wherever you listen. And if you're loving Karmic Mirror, we'd appreciate a glowing review or a share with someone who could benefit.
As we close, remember, life is not a one-size-fits-all approach. How are you honoring your unique path? Stay curious and always be kind to yourself. Until next time on Karmic Mirror.